What's happening? Welcome back to my little show here on a Friday. Today is actually my day off. I do that Monday through Thursday thing, but I was just talking to Reed Davis the other day, and he was like, Sean, how's your radio show going? I was like, Reed, I heard somewhere that we got like the #1 radio show on Blog Talk Radio in the health section, so I was like, yo, Wednesday I didn't want to do a show because I was a little tired, wanted a little break, but I was like, you know what, let's just kind of keep this baby rolling. So Reed and I were like, yo, let's do a show. Let's talk about some digestive stuff and autoimmunity and, you know, how all these things are totally related with yeast and bacteria and nasty stuff going on within the gut. And Reed and I have actually talked about this on a previous show, but that was before I had as much experience as I do with clients, you know, working through some of these issues, you know. I was on the phone with somebody the other day, and I was like, how's your digestion? And the person was like, oh, it's good. You know, I've got great digestion. I said, well, you know, how often are you pooping? She says, once every 3 days or so. You know, she just didn't know what normal pooping is all about. You know what I mean? Because it's just one of those things, like I've said in my videos, that we really don't talk about very much. And some people just don't know, like, yo, my digestion's jacked, and just have no idea. And the thing is that a lot of people will call me up and say, hey, Sean, I want to get on this diet. But the thing is, you got a bad diet, and you got bad digestion, you know, of course that sucks. That's not a good thing, but you can have the greatest diet in the world, y'all. But if your digestion is bad, then you're not going to be getting all those nutrients. You know what I mean? Because that's what food is. Food is a shuttle system for nutrients to come into the body, but it has to make it through the digestive system properly in order to get into your bloodstream, in order to nourish your body. And so we have to get from point A to point B, but a lot of us are kind of, you know, going off track. And then we get on these great diets and we don't understand why they work very well. And so, you know, we're going to talk about digestion. You guys probably know Reed Davis. He's been on my show. I think it's his 4th time coming on. We can't go a season without having Reed on. So we're going to have some fun today. Let's see what I got on my little list here of things to talk about real quick. I didn't do a video this week. I'll probably do one tomorrow. I was kind of busy. That's really it. Today's the last day for Metabolic Typing sale. $100 off. I extended it for a week, and so last chance on that. But let's bring my man on the show. Reed Davis, are you there?
I'm here. Good afternoon, Sean. How are you doing?
I'm phenomenal, man. It's a nice day outside, huh?
It's fantastic, man. Of course, you know, we do live in San Diego, probably the best weather on the planet, so, you know, not bragging or anything.
I'm bragging, buddy. I'm looking outside right now, and it's beautiful, man. As soon as we get done with this show, I'm going out and enjoying some of this nice heat that we have going on in late October, man. Reed Davis, you're the founder of Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. You know, your course has changed my whole outlook on things. We deal with things, you know, from a root cause perspective. You know what I mean? That's your thing, find the root cause. We tend to kind of do the doctor thing, and people are getting fed up with that, you know, doing the doctor thing and just cutting off the symptoms and not really dealing with the root cause. And one of the root causes of many is poor digestion. Can you tell us about some of the digestive problems that people present themselves to you with?
Yeah, I sure can, Sean, but if you don't mind, let me just say one thing to you I haven't said to you. You know, of all the people that have taken the FDN course, the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition course, you're at the top of the heap, man. I mean, you're in the very first course I ever taught, and you've taken it to heart. I know you do more of the FDN work than just about anybody. You know, the number of labs that you're running and things like that, I can tell that you're really doing it. And so I want to commend you for your work, and I know you're helping a ton of people out there with a lot of things, not just, you know, the gut, but, you know, the other day when we were talking and we were going over some of your cases, and where the gut became the obvious sort of the area that they had paid the least attention to. And that's what our lab work does. It really points the finger. I mean, you're able to, with just a few labs, really zero in on the malfunctions that are at the root of their health problems. So, a lot of people will go to any provider. There's lots of good people out there. And, you have people with heartburn, gas, indigestion, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, alternating constipation and diarrhea. You get all of these sort of poop problems.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's an old joke about the person who goes to their doctor and he asks them, well, how's your elimination process? And there's a story of the one older lady who goes, oh, it's just like clockwork, every Tuesday without fail. It's like, I actually know people like that, man. Like you ask them to do the stool test that we do for, we do that stool test for all the pathogens, parasites, bacteria, funguses, viruses, all these little buggers that are at the root of some of those problems. And they say, well, and you tell them, I need 4 stool samples. So for 4 days in a row, you're going to give me a poop sample. Put it in this. They go, what do you mean 4 days in a row? I only go every 4 days. So, well, guess what? It takes them a month to get the stool test done. But that's really at the heart. We should first understand it. There's some old naturopathic medicine thinking that says you should go about every time you eat. So if you're eating 3 big meals a day, basically, you don't want to be holding on to the remains of that. We call it waste product for a reason. You want to be eliminating your waste product, and if you're eating a good diet with lots of fiber and all that stuff that's supposed to be, you're going to have waste product. And the last thing you want to do is be a waste product storage body, right?
Exactly. You don't want to be walking around with a bunch of waste in you, because I don't think people realize that the digestive system is so linked in with the rest of the systems within the body. First of all, it has to be working properly in order for you to get the nutrition and the building blocks to build and repair your body. I mean, of course, that's number one, but the digestive system is also linked in with the immune system, very much so, and the detoxification system, and the hormonal system as well, and so it's incredibly important. Let's get into kind of like the structure. I don't want to go too deep into the structure of the digestive system, but tell us about the mucosal barrier or the intestinal barrier and what that does.
Okay, I'd love to do that, but me, I got to back up for just a second and say that what you're telling people is critical, and it's not what you eat. You've heard this old expression, you are what you eat. Really, you're what you break down and absorb. And so there can be a big difference in how you open the show with, it's not, what you eat is incredibly important, but how your intestinal barrier is functioning can be critical to that. It's got to be actually breaking down and absorbing the nutrients. So that's one of the functions we'll look at. Sean, that you're able to run we call it the mucosal barrier function test. And what you're measuring is the ability of the small intestine, which is where most digestion takes place, to not only break down and absorb nutrition into the body, but to protect you from anything nasty in that food product or whatever it is coming down the pike. And it's really important to understand that the small intestine, which again, that's where digestion and absorption of nutrients really takes place, that's not a garden hose. That's, it's actually a living, sort of, in a way, breathing, tube, and it's got a unique structure, and that's what we look at on the intestinal barrier function test is all that structure. So, gosh, this just opens up so much, Sean, and you know how my mind gets going. I think it's important for people to understand that, we chew our food, and you start this chemical breakdown, and it goes into the small intestine, and there's more chemical breakdown of the nutrients. So you've prepared food for the nutrients to be extracted in the small intestine by how you chew and the quality of your saliva. It goes into the stomach, the quality of the acid and the pepsin and the other things in there. So now this food's moving into this small intestine, what I call the gut. So when I just say gut, I'm talking small intestine. You're looking at over 20 up to 30 feet of tube that is a living organism in itself. It's got all these chemicals being produced, and living thing, the good flora, the bad flora, all the stuff that's in there. So, the question that you're asking, like how are we going to make sure we're breaking down and absorbing nutrition? How does it get from being food into our bodies to nourish and, all the proteins and the carbohydrates and the fats and the vitamins and minerals and trace minerals and, everything that comes out of food. And at the same time, by the way, that same intestinal barrier, it's got to let the good stuff through. It's got to break it down and get it into an absorbable condition or state and let it through into the where it goes. Talk about that in a sec. But it's also got to protect us from the parasites, the bacteria, the fungal spores, and the virus, all the nasty stuff that's in there. So again, it's not like a garden hose that's just impermeable, and there's a structure in there. Now, how deep do you want me to go, Sean? Because
you know what? Let me give the audience the analogy that I like to give to really simplify it. I consider the mucosal barrier to kind of be like the screen on one of your windows. And that screen on your window is supposed to allow the good air to come through, but at the same time it keeps the bad stuff out, the flies, the mosquitoes, the bugs, and whatnot. And the mucosal barrier is very similar, that it's permeable just like the screen on your window, and just like the air comes through the screen, the nutrients are supposed to go through the mucosal barrier. And that mucosal barrier keeps all of the bad stuff out, like the toxins and bacteria, viruses, as well as food particles. And so we want the nutrients to get where they need to go to nourish the body, but at the same time we need that intestinal barrier to act just like that screen on your window and keep the bad stuff out so it can't get in. Now, one of the problems is that the mucosal barrier becomes broken down due to several factors that we'll talk about soon, but when it breaks down, then what happens? You get holes poked in that screen on the window, and then things start to get into the bloodstream that aren't quite supposed to be there. And when they're there, then you've got some type of immune activity going on that is going to, hamper the function of the rest of the body. Would that be correct?
Man, I really like that analogy, and I would just say that so far as the screening of the pathogens, those would be the disease-causing particles, the bacteria and, let's say, parasites. So you're kind of screening them out, and you're also, the chemicals that are supposed to be being produced, and I'm just calling them chemicals, they're being produced by the mucosal lining. The lining of the intestine is producing these antibodies and things that should neutralize those things and carry them out of the body. So they're going to be excreted. They're going to, hey, this is the good stuff, let's let it through, and let's take this bad stuff and neutralize it so that it's no longer harmful. Basically, kill a parasite, what have you, and then escort it out of the body. It's supposed to just keep passing through and see you later, buddy. So that would be just a little tuning up of that analogy. It's a great analogy, the screening out of the flies and bugs and things. And what's really interesting to me is how if you look at this food, the good stuff that we do want coming through, the way that transports through into the body isn't directly, this is really an important thing, it doesn't go directly into the general circulation bloodstream. In other words, it doesn't come through the wall of the intestine and go to your heart, lung, and your muscles and all that sort of stuff. What it does, it goes into a closed circuit, if you will. It's called the hepatic portal system, where there are a bunch of veins and arteries on the small intestine, and all of that nutrition comes through the wall, comes through lacteals and little tiny arteries in the villi, and it all goes over to the liver. So the food product is being taken into this special bloodstream that just takes it to the liver first for further processing. And so that's an important concept of it doesn't go into general circulation. It goes into the closed circulation of the hepatic portal system over to the liver. And we all know that. I mean, that's kind of a common knowledge. When you take something orally, you take a supplement orally, it's going to get changed by the liver. That's a huge concept that we need to kind of throw in here. Because what you mentioned about, how do these nasty things, let's say that mucosal barrier starts to break down. You said little holes. We simply call that permeability. And what we don't want is hyperpermeability, increased permeability of the gut. Because then these little bugs and even just food particles that aren't properly broken down can leak out into general circulation. So they're outside of this hepatic portal system, and they're out into general circulation, and that's when hell breaks loose. Because your bodies own the immune system of the body. The humoral or the bloodstream immune system starts attacking that stuff. It starts going, hey, wow, this is bad, this is nasty. It's going to cause all kinds of inflammation. So you got people, you mentioned, hey, Reed, what kind of symptoms do people with bad digestion have? We talked about, heartburn, gas, indigestion, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, just sort of the poop problems. Well, now you got people coming to you who have aches and pains, inflammation, sore joints, headaches, migraines. They've got, this whole sort of fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety. You could just really go down a long list. What about skin problems? All these things are from the inflammatory. It's the immune system in the general circulation kicking it in. So I think it's really important. It's just kind of indicating how important that gut is, isn't it?
What causes the gut to break down? What causes that permeability you're talking about?
Okay, perfect. Man, what a great question, because this is at the heart of what we do to help people, Sean. You've been studying this for quite a while. People come to you with these complaints, and your job as the health detective is to get to the root cause if you can. Now, we have our little series of tests, adrenal function, hormone function. When it gets down to the gut function test, we're able to look and predict hyperpermeability. And what happens in my experience, which is about 10 plus years and 11, 12,000 clients, we're looking at something. Usually, I would say the number one culprit would be foods and other particles that come down into that small intestine. And they irritate. They're simply inflammatory. They're irritating. And it's just the nature of things. Everyone's different. What might be good food to you is not good food to me. It's just you can eat pineapples and papayas. Pineapples and papayas tend to irritate the lining of my small intestine. And I may have no symptoms at first. Might poop just fine, might not have any of these other things going on. But that irritation, it's not a true allergy, it's just an irritation. It's an inflammatory response. Starts to change the environment inside that small intestine. And you need to, start picturing it. Let's just visualize what's going on in there. Inside the small intestine, you have little fingers called villi. And on those little teeny tiny fingers called villi, which are just throughout the whole thing, and they're producing juices that help you break down and absorb nutrition. They also have little arteries in them that carry and transport fats and carbohydrates and proteins into that hepatic portal system. That's how things get absorbed. Now, on those little tiny villi are their own little tiny villi. They're called microvilli, also known as the brush border. Now, these are even finer, tinier, microscopic type little hairs, and those are producing other juices, and we'll just say chemicals and juices and things that work all together to break down the food and help with immunity. They're capturing some of these same, the antibodies and other juices, let's say, are neutralizing the bad stuff, and they're processing the good stuff to the point where it can be absorbed. They're breaking it down to little teeny tiny things. And those are called enzymes and other stuff. So what happens with this irritation is you actually start to kill off some of the microvilli. So the irritation, the inflammation, your little villi would become like bald-headed, let's say, like me and you. and then now you're losing the ability, you don't have the enzyme production to break down certain nutrients. and so you become somewhat nutrient deficient. And, you know, the cascade where that might go, we won't go there. So eventually this builds up to the environment in the gut isn't friendly, and the amount of good bacteria versus bad bacteria gets out of whack. You end up with what's called a dysbiosis. Too much bad bacteria is now able to thrive versus the amount of good bacteria. And it cascades from there. You end up now you have a slightly weakened immune system as far as gut immunity goes. And you also have less digested. You're not really breaking down absorbing nutrition. And that ends up, and this is a very slow progression. This could be happening from the time you were a kid. Now, you might see kids showing up with headaches and bad skin and, you know, ADD symptoms or something. And this could be at the root of their problem. But let's say they have no symptoms, they end up into adulthood, and all they know is they've got some gas, heartburn, indigestion, and bloating. But what's happened is now that the brush border, these microvilli are gone. It starts getting into the villi themselves. Now, when villi atrophy, the little fingers, now you're not able to transport good nutrition into the body, and the little space between the villi starts to swell up. It's called crypt hyperplasia, and you get flattened out spots where you're just not getting anything. And now guess what? Now your immune system's really compromised. Now you end up with simply an environment in the gut that starts attacking. It's, in a sense, it's kind of a little enclosed autoimmune thing. They're in the structure of the small intestine are what are called tight junctures. And here's the answer to your question. These, you know, it's not a garden hose, a plastic tube that's solid from one end to the other. It's made up in little sections, little small sections, and this bad environment starts loosening up those tight junctures. The protein molecules in there are affected, and so you end up with a little gut permeability. And what I'm trying to do here is give you enough of I want you to be able to visualize the gut from the inside, you know, the villi, the microvilli, the space between the villi called the crypts swells up. It ends up flattened out, bald-headed, and poor digestion. The environment, the pH levels change, the amount of good versus bad bacteria changes. Now you're really susceptible to what? Well, for one thing, parasites and worse bacterial infections. And, you know, we see on these tests all the time really nasty situations. So the gut gets permeable from the tight junctures loosening up. And then probably the worst case, Sean, and you've seen this on a lot of your tests, I looked at them with you, people end up with these fungal overgrowths. And when fungus comes along, a healthy gut should eliminate it, neutralize it, and eliminate it, and keep it sequestered away where it's not harmful. But a gut that we're talking about from these years of food sensitivities and other things coming down the pike that the body's not handling very well, and the change in the environment, now fungus, like, you know, candida, will actually mutate into a form where it's planting down roots, and that pokes holes in your gut. Well, you know, we have a lot of leaky gut out there from an severe overgrowth of fungus.
And just to backtrack a little bit, Reed, when we were talking about causes of the breakdown of that wall, it goes beyond just inflammatory foods, right? We're talking birth control, pill use, long-term NSAID use, stress as well, right? Yeah. Alcohol use, I believe, too, right?
Absolutely. You know, these things that were not designed to break down and absorb, they're very offensive. And part of that inflammatory process, and I use foods because they're the first place I look, because I can identify, I mean, the foods, you know, through other testing, but you're absolutely right. In the environment, what about heavy metals? What about all this stuff we're breathing and sucking up and everything else? For sure, Sean.
And so we're breaking down the border, and now everybody has yeast in them, correct?
Yeah, that's what they say. I mean, you know, you're going to find some spores everywhere you look. The difference, though, would be, is your body able to handle that? There's even, you know, a lot of work done that says that it's beneficial to have a bunch of this stuff. I don't know if you read, for listeners, I would go to bioimmersion.com and sign up for their newsletters, because Sean Bardell is a guy who's done tremendous research in this, and his recent article says that this is another organism, like it's almost another organ. Like if we know we have our heart, lung, liver, kidneys, pancreas, adrenal glands, and all that, but they're talking about this living flora in our guts, 3, 4, 5 pounds of it in a big gut person, it's just like another organ. It's a bionome. It's just part of us. We're actually, human beings that it becomes a colony that we're part of, and it's part of us, and it's got to be all just right.
Right.
I don't want to go too far out on you.
As far as the candida, getting back to the candida and the yeast, what are some of the symptoms of having yeast overgrowth?
Oh man, the first thing I see is the obvious discharge, and coated tongue and stuff like that. If you got a real candida thing going on, you're going to have itchiness. Especially, you see it more in females. They tend to manifest more with vaginal discharge. But you look at the coated tongue, the whitish coating of the tongue, and itchiness and bad skin, and that's sort of the outward stuff. Also, I see a lot of because it does affect digestion so much, and the breakdown of nutrients and things, a lot of anxiety, depression, migraine headaches,
brain fog.
Brain fog and stuff. And again, once you get a leaky gut, you're talking about particles that don't belong in general circulation coming through the gut, and they could be toxins and just pieces of food and pieces of dead bugs, and just whatever you have. Your blood streams, we call it the humoral immune system, is going to kick in, and you end up with those things getting very confused about who's the offender here. And that's where autoimmune comes from. If you talk, you're looking at someone with autoimmune conditions, whether it be rheumatoid arthritis or multiple sclerosis or what have you, there's a lot of really good doctors and research out there that say, well, this is a natural progression of these things leaking out of the gut, and the body starts attacking those things, whatever it might be, and then it starts attacking itself because it's confused. Is this
the concept of molecular mimicry, where your immune system may be used to fighting off a particular molecule and say, hey, that thyroid really looks like that molecule I've been fighting off.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Let's go mess around with that one too.
Yeah, they've done. I'm not a microbiologist by any stretch, but I do understand. I always tend to visualize these particles have little flags on them that tell the immune system particles to attack it or neutralize it. And these flags, let's say on one cell that is a bad cell or a bad particle, start looking a lot like the flags on the other good particle, so the body just attacks. It's how it works.
So it can go after cartilage, it can go after organs, glands. It's just kind of like a case of mistaken identity. Would you call it that?
That's exactly how I look at it.
Right on. Sugar cravings. I want to get back to yeast just one more time.
Yeah, sure.
Sugar cravings and insomnia. Can yeast be linked to that as well?
Well, yeah, for sure. And, the sugar cravings, yeast feeds on sugar. I don't know if you know how beer is made, but, or wine or some of these things, but they use carbohydrates, which is sugar, and that's how it forms. That's how they make it. So it feeds on that stuff. And someone with sugar cravings, the first thing I have them do is, get on a little, we do their metabolic typing diet and have them watch their carbs. If the sugar cravings don't go away, then we start looking deeper. And that's a real obvious thing to look for. Would be.
Mm-hmm. What about insomnia? What would they have to do with each other? Anything?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of insomnia again can be from low blood sugar. You want to have people. I usually have them eat a metabolic typing balanced snack before bedtime to keep so that their blood sugar stays stable for a while. And beyond that, what you can have easily, one of the most common reasons for insomnia is the immune system kicks in, which because it's fighting a yeast or a parasite or some bacteria, and that invocation of the immune system kicking in raises cortisol. Your body, so cortisol will wake you up too. Cortisol and adrenaline kind of go hand in hand, and so you have people waking up because of a rise in cortisol. That, by the way, can also come from alcohol. If you drink a beer or a wine at 8, 9 o'clock, it might help you relax, and therefore you fall asleep. But you're going to wake up because of the cortisol bounce. You just get this bounce in cortisol. So I think a lot of that insomnia is from cortisol based on the immune system kicking in. It's working extra hard for you. And, cortisol is supposed to be low at night.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I know one thing that we look for on our tests is low melatonin. What does a low melatonin have to do with digestive function?
Oh, man. Well, they say melatonin is made in the gut. So if you see low melatonin, by the way, it's made out of serotonin. So, and it's been well documented, the relationship between serotonin, which is, your mood elevator, feel-good type hormone, or neurotransmitter, actually. And, that's made in the gut. And so there's a direct relationship between gut and emotional fragility and things. And so, we're not measuring serotonin, but we do measure melatonin. And melatonin is made from serotonin. So when that's real low, we suspect and we need to investigate further gut malfunction. And I'm glad you raised that, because our very first intake with anyone involves collecting some saliva, and we measure melatonin as on every single person, first step foot in the door,
Absolutely.
So yeah, and it points towards gut malfunction. That's where it's made, Sean.
I think one thing that people don't know is that serotonin is not only the happy, feel-good neurotransmitter, but it's also what keeps your poop moving, and so it fights constipation. And so people they don't know that very much. I want to get a little bit into food sensitivities a bit, and how those come about, and also if someone has a food sensitivity, do they have to stay away from the food forever? So that's kind of two questions in one.
Yeah. Well, if we detect a food sensitivity, you need to stay away from it. You can't make excuses, and you've got to do it. You need to be a very strictly eliminate the offender. Now, it's very interesting how this works. And I'd say generally, no, you don't have to stay off it forever, unless it's a real genetic inability to break down that product. Like we know that gliadin, which is part of the gluten, when you hear of gluten sensitivity, gliadin, basically referred to as wheat allergy, barley, rye, oats, wheat, gluten, gliadin molecule. That can be genetic, and it could be that you should probably never eat that stuff. So there's that kind of food sensitivity. But the ones you're talking about may be part of that mimicry, and also remember that, let's say you had this genetic. You start with they don't like gliadin. The body just doesn't like gliadin, which is gluten, same thing kind of. So, but you keep eating it. What do you think keep eating it's going to do? You're going to get inflamed. You're going to have that process we first start talking about. You're going to break down that brush border on the villi in the gut. And those brush border, those little microvilli, produce enzymes that break down milk sugar. So now guess what? You've acquired the inability to drink milk, and break down it and absorb and stuff like that. So some of these things I'd say are acquired, and if you got off of them and then healed the area, healed the gut, healed the villi, the microvilli, you bring it all back to as best as you're going to get it, then you can reintroduce some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
That's
so
just generally.
Not only go off the foods that you've acquired a sensitivity to, but also heal the gut so
Yeah.
you don't develop more food sensitivities. I'm sure you have the experience where some of my clients are sensitive to every single food they put in their mouth. And it's, not only do they have to change the foods, but you always have to remind them, heal the gut, and it does take some time to do that. Beyond food sensitivity, what about toxicity? We run that, what is it? Urinary bile acid sulfites score. What does digestion have to do with detoxification?
Well, I think what you're referring to is we call it the metabolic assessment profile, which is a simple urine test that will tell us if you have excessive oxidative stress, which usually comes from toxicity. What the listeners want to do is think about how if an apple turns brown, that's from oxidization, and so there's this excessive oxidization going on. It's like a nail rusting. A car sits out on your front lawn for 10 years. It breaks down. So this oxidative process. Everyone has a balance. Remember, that's not all bad. There's a balance between the pro-oxidative, and the antioxidants. We all know we need antioxidants. The body makes plenty of them. And you need to consume, vitamin C, D, E, and all the other coenzyme Q10, alpha-lipoic acid. All those, you have antioxidants and you have oxidization. And a huge oxidizer would be the toxins from either overexercise is huge, or things that are going on in our gut. Like if you have bacterial, viral, fungal, these kind of infections, parasite infections, they're dead bodies. They're stinking up the place, and it's toxic. And so that will create, on that test you're talking about, it's easy to see. It's 1, 2, 3, run the test. You see this excessive oxidization. Now, you mentioned the liver, the urinary bile acid sulfates. It's the same urine test. It's another marker we look at there. When we see that elevated, we're looking at now, remember, everything's kind of going into this hepatic portal system from that mucosal lining. It's passing through, not into general circulation, but into the hepatic. It's all being taken over the liver. So if that stuff coming through is toxic because of parasites, bacteria, fungus, viruses, food sensitivities, stinky things, it's going to show up as stress on the liver. And the same urine markers called urinary bile acid sulfates, the liver starts spilling over into the bloodstream products that show up in the urine, because the kidneys filter the blood, ends up in the pee. So we can see that kind of oxidative stress and also the toxic overload and antigen overload long before it becomes like a liver-ish. Your doctor's not going to see it if he's just looking at liver enzymes on a blood test. So it's a way early detection system for, hey,
I think I learned in one of my courses that the liver enzyme scores don't actually show up as positive until the liver's lost like 50% of its normal function. And so that's why I really like the test that we run, because it's, like you said, we can detect things very early. And so is what you're saying is that there's so many bad things going through the hepatic portal vein and going to the liver that the liver can't detoxify things as fast as they're coming in?
Precisely. That's as good an analogy as anyone. That's right. It starts to get overloaded. Now, this can happen and be producing the excessive excessive bile acid sulfates, which become urinary bile acid sulfates, and that's how we measure it. Now, so yeah, it's stress on the liver. Now, the liver does so many other jobs that you don't want it to be handling all that stuff. It's got I don't say much more important things to do, but of the 200 known jobs, it's got to have time for all those jobs. It can't be sort of inundated with this toxic overload.
Now, where do these toxins go? If the liver can't get rid of them, do they just get stored in the body? Like, they got to go somewhere. Yeah. Where do they go?
Yeah, that's it. They end up in general circulation through, and they can cause all kinds of ill effects. They're going to affect maybe even every cell in your body.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the kidneys, they're going to put stress in the kidneys. Is supposed to filter. We have a variety of detoxification systems, Sean. As you know, there's and they're all going to take a hit if you have that going on. So the liver is going to handle what it can, pass it off to other the skin is a detoxification organ, right? So you find people with skin eruptions and bad skin things going on because it's a filter, it's a detoxification organ. There's obviously the lymph system, which is huge. The blood's going to pass things into the lymph system as a method of detoxification. Obviously, the lungs, the lungs excrete or they release bad gases. We get rid of things that way, and the kidneys are huge. I mean, they got to do their job and excrete into the bladder and urinary system, all those bad things. So, doesn't it?
Can this lead to brain fog as well, Reed?
Well, yeah, I got my own theories on that. I think that toxic blood leads to, if you have toxins, and I mean, just generally speaking, for sure. What I always look at it as is you need well-oxygenated blood, and this is just my sort of non-medical way of explaining it. I like to speak in pictures, and so, you don't have room, if you got toxins in the blood that don't belong there, the body's not handling properly, you're not properly being excreted and detoxified, neutralized, and what have you, there's not going to be as much room for oxygen and good nutrients, and things that are very beneficial. So it isn't
kind of like it's kind of like what Paul Chek said the other week when we saw him. He said toxic colon equals toxic blood, which equals toxic brain. That's one of the things that I really walked away from, among a whole lot of other things he went over that night we were there.
Yeah, that was just fun. I enjoyed sitting with you through that. That was cool. And yeah, we always pick up these little pearls. I mean, even from today, no one's transcribing every word, nor should they. But they're going. Hopefully, your listeners today will pick up a few pearls that they can take with them.
Exactly. And speaking of listeners, hey, if anybody wants to call in, got a question for Reed, 347-237-5608, 347-237-5608. And as always, I forgot to say earlier, the tweet deck is open, UG Wellness. If you got questions there, I see a couple of you guys out there listening to the show. Let's get to the subject a lot of people just can't wait for us to talk about. I kind of wanted to save for last, parasites. Of course, the environment within the body has to be conducive to harboring parasites, but how does the parasite get into the body? Where do they come from?
Well, the biggest thing you'll see in the literature is what's called the oral fecal route. So, it could be just uncleanliness, and lack of sanitation. I mean, in the countries that have the poorest sanitation, you have the highest incidence of parasitic infections. That's my opinion based on a lot of knowledge and experience and things like that. And I think the oral fecal route, bad water, is another way. I mean, a lot of these things are just through water that's not been purified or, just dirty water, The thing that I like to get to, Sean, is how your body's supposed to be able to protect you from these things if it's in good shape. I mean, for most of it. There's certain real virulent strains of bacteria and stuff that it doesn't matter how healthy you are, you're going to get whacked. But most of these things that we come across are what we call opportunistic buggers, and they're only going to thrive in an unhealthy gut, one that's conducive to it getting a foothold and propagating there. So, but back to your thing, exposure can come. I mean, I think dogs that lick their butts and then lick your face, I don't think that's a good idea, and things like that.
I don't think so either.
You know what I mean? Like I don't let, you know what I mean? There's all kinds of ways. And then there's always you got to check out, your partners or whoever, like if you can go from one person to another pretty easily in some cases. swapping bodily fluids needs to be looked at pretty hard.
Yeah. That's the case with H. pylori. I've had clients who will come up with H. pylori and their partner will have it too. And I think I was telling you about the guy who I spoke with who had been trying to get rid of H. pylori forever, had tried everything he possibly could. And then at the end of our conversation, he says, hey, my wife's got some digestive issues. Can you talk to her too? And I was like, did your wife ever get tested for H. pylori? He says, no. And I'm like, you got to get her tested too. She's probably just giving it. You guys are just passing it back and forth. And so it's very, very contagious. What about the ones, Reed, that are considered benign? Sometimes parasites and whatnot will come up on our tests, and we'll look them up, and they'll say, oh, they're completely benign, asymptomatic. How can those become symptomatic with clients?
Well, give me a little bit more information, like benign as in someone says, don't worry about this one? I mean, because I've had that where, I've done a stool test and it says, they got blastocystis hominis. And then they take it to the doctor and he says, oh, don't worry, that stuff's not a pathogenic.
Exactly. That's what I mean right there, yeah.
Well, I think that, that's a doctor who's treating the test results instead of treating the person. And that's a huge thing that we need to keep in mind as we're running these tests, is that we don't treat test results. What we say, and this is something I learned from my medical director, Dr. Bailey, many years ago. He says, what does this test result tell you about the person? And that way you're going to come up with what's the best way to help this person become really healthy and vibrantly healthy. And so if you see something that medical authorities say isn't really pathogenic, that's not truly a disease-causing parasite. That's just, what are they saying? It's an ordinary parasite? The fact is you have an organism in there that doesn't belong there. So it tells you that they've got a weakened immune system, and these things are able to thrive, and that likely, there's an imbalance in the good versus bad flora. The pH levels aren't right. They may have some actually very serious sort of preconditions. What they're saying is, you're not sick enough for me to treat, which I think is a ridiculous concept. I think, in other words, you've got a parasite, come back in 6 months when it's killing you. So what we do is we look at that and say, what does it tell us about this person? It tells me, again, they've got poor digestion, poor assimilation of nutrients. They've got a weakened immune system. They're allowing this creature to inhabit them and set up shop instead of immediately killing it and excreting it out of the body. That's what a healthy immune system would do, right?
Right. Now, is the parasite going to get rid of itself? Because I've had clients who went to, Thailand 15 years ago and have been like, oh, my digestion hasn't been the same, and then they'll come up with something on their test. So will the body get rid of it on its own, like if you repair the immune system, or do you have to go on an antibiotic or alternative protocol to get rid of them?
I'm for treating myself. I think that there's something to be said. It depends what that creature is first. That's why we run the test and identify it. We don't just assume that they've got, okay, you went to some foreign country, and you got an infection. You felt bad afterwards, so let's just do a parasite cleanse. I mean, that's a possibility too. There's lots of good products out there. I think there are anyway, to just do general cleansing, rid myself of this and that stuff. But I like doing the testing, identifying species, because then it tells me, I get more insights as to what the environment's like in that gut. What are they allowing to live? There is a difference between an opportunistic organism and a real virulent, like nail in the coffin type thing. So, physicians would be very concerned about the nail in the coffin type ones. This stuff can kill this person, so I'm going to have to treat them. That's what they mean by pathogenic and treating it, all that. But what we're saying is these opportunistic ones, which the body can handle when it's healthy. So, and some people might say that about blasto and some of these other things we see very commonly. Well, those are just opportunistic. In other words, they only thrive where they can and your body should be able to handle them. So there's a chance with some of those that if you just really restored normal gut flora, like probiotics, you kind of crowd them out, and they can't thrive. So in that sense, the body, with some support, could overcome that opportunistic thing. Like yeast is opportunistic. We all get exposed, but why does one lady get, a real bad, like mutated candidiasis versus the other, just their body handles it? So, I hope that clears the waters a little bit.
Right. I got one more question of my own, then we'll go into some of the Facebook questions and call it a day. Medical stool tests. I've had many clients who've taken stool tests to their doctor and not found a darn thing, and then they'll take one of our stool tests and they'll find something. Why is that?
Well, really good question. It depends on the stool test and what they're looking for. Now, there's different reasons you might look at the stool, for one thing. For parasitology, for looking for bugs, I think that it's not going to produce much if you're only doing one single stool sample. The reason for that is the life cycle of these bugs and the shedding of their skins and the laying of their eggs, and this whole idea that you've got to do multiple stool tests to catch it, because just doing one day, you might not see anything. We do a minimum of 4 days in a row because we figure that's a much better chance to identify these parasites. But the other, if someone says, "Well, I did a stool test," you don't even know that they did any parasitology. You don't even know they checked. It could have been just looking for food particles or for blood. A lot of doctors look for hidden, bleeding ulcers, for instance. You're not going to see blood actually coming out of the anus, but you might see the blood, red blood cells microscopically within the stool. So it depends what they're looking for. And they also look for food particles. How well is your food broken down?
Mm-hmm. So should the patient go into the doctor asking for a stool test? Should they actually inquire, "Hey, what are you guys looking for when I run this stool test?"
Yeah, that'd be a good idea. Yeah, for sure. I mean, why would the doctor be running it in the first place? Because it's not they'd have to be pursuing some line of thinking or logic,
Mm-hmm.
But here's the deal with testing. The reason that I put the sequence of tests that we use in FDN, Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, there is a logical sequence to them, because a lot of people run a stool test and they're just really shooting in the dark for guessing at trying to catch something. Matter of fact, I ran one years and years ago, 10 years ago, out of sequence, before I had developed the sequence. Maybe this is how I did develop sequence. My medical director, Dr. Bailey, goes, I'm showing him a test result, and it didn't have anything on it. It really wasn't much to look at. And he goes, "Well, why'd you run this?" And I said to him, quote, "Well, I thought I'd catch something." And he goes, "Oh, so you were on a fishing trip."
Going
and I go, "Well, no," but he goes, no excuses. You ran a test with no comprehension, no idea of what the blank you were doing. You just thought you'd catch something. So you just wasted that client's money on a useless test. That's not to say stool testing is useless. It's just to say that, look, you better know what you're looking for and have a logical reason for running it. You don't just run a stool test.
Yeah. That was hard for me to grasp at first. I'd be like, "Oh, I want to skip this test. I know what's going on and whatnot." But I would always get into trouble every single time. And then we get clients who will run those first few tests on, and they go, "Okay, we got to run a stool test and a food sensitivity test." And I'm like, "Well, why didn't you just tell me that in the beginning?" "Well, I didn't know. I don't want you to waste $300-something on this test and another few $100 another one, plus my fee, from jump."
Mm-hmm.
We need to know what's going on within, and then we can make a decision on what we're going to do later. I know that the bill kind of stacks up over time, but I'd rather know you need to spend the money than to guess that you're going to spend the money on this. And I think I've had a few long conversations with clients about this, and after a while they get it. We got a phone call from
let me just say one quick thing first. Not only that, Sean, is that there's that logical sequence, and you understand, hey, I don't want to just go on a fishing trip. But if let's say you did go on a fishing trip and got lucky and found a parasite, the typical person using that method is just going to treat the parasite, and they won't know what the true gut condition is. They won't know that the real work isn't treating the parasite; it's treating the condition that allowed that parasite to inhabit and infect and infest.
It's all in the why. Yeah, it's all in the why. Why is it like this? You got a parasite. Why do you have a parasite? I was talking to somebody yesterday, and she had been to the endocrinologist, and she had some issues going on, and they never went any further than that. And I'm going, why? Why? Can't sleep, digestive issues, brain fog and whatnot. Why do you have those issues, and how are they impacting your adrenal glands and your hormones? That's what I'm interested in, not just giving you some bioidentical hormones and saying, hey, use these and move on with your life. It doesn't really work out that way. You have to ask, why? I've learned all this stuff from you, Reed, man. If the audience doesn't know, Reed and I, we've had some battles. And Reed called me his problem child last time I saw him, but that's real. I mean, that's the way I want to be, because I want to learn this stuff the right way, and Reed is always right, for the most part.
No, I'm not always right. I will say, though, that you've sent me some emails, and I don't want to write them back. I just call you, and Sean goes, uh-oh, I'm being called to the principal's office.
That's how I got in this position, by questioning things, by being a skeptic about things, and it's hard to sell me. It's hard to sell me on some stuff, but it's all about experience. You got the 10 years of experience, and so I take from that. And sometimes I don't agree, but usually you're right on point. Let's go to the phone lines. We got a caller from the 425. Welcome to my show. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
James from Seattle.
What's up, James? How's it going, man?
Good. I'm driving, so let me know if you guys can't hear me with background noise.
Loud and clear, yeah.
Okay. My question is, I guess a while back, or for a while, I've always had stomach issues, and the conventionalism was I had IBS until I started really researching it. And I got a food test, the Lisa test, I think that's how you say it, and it came back with 25 food sensitivities.
Right.
And my doctor thinks it's leaky gut. And so I'm doing the rotation diet, and I'm just trying to figure out, besides the rotation diet, taking digestive enzymes, intestinal peri complex, all that stuff, what are two main, or maybe not even two, but a couple main things other than that I can do to really strengthen my gut?
Really good questions and a great call, James. I appreciate you asking. We've seen IBS, by the way, completely resolved, and it does require some effort. You're looking at up to a couple years of finding the right combination. First of all, identifying those foods and eliminating those. Like you said, getting on the rotation diet after you've done a real strict avoidance well. I like the ELISA testing. I think that the IgG-mediated test for food sensitivity is very good, very valid, and so you catch all these delayed food sensitivities coming. And 25 foods is not uncommon. It's not as many as I've seen, but it's a good, healthy amount. I see lots of people with only 8 or 10, and I've seen people with 50. So 25 is a good amount. Not all of those will be the actual trigger for your symptoms, and this whole idea of what you have going on, the IBS thing. It may be that only 5 of them are the real true irritators, and the others just are kind of coming along for the ride. But you got to eliminate them all, and the fact that you're using the enzymes and the other things you mentioned is very good. You need some assistance. You need to really try to help the environment along through this healing process. But it is, and you mentioned leaky gut, and that's a very good, so your doctor calls, that's his diagnosis in a sense, hypergut permeability. So now you're likely going to have some other issues while you resolve your IBS. I think that the healing of that is going to require, now, Sean, how are you on this show about mentioning products? I think L-glutamine is a good thing for one. I think glycine is a good thing. I think there's herbs like comfrey. I think you could use some pepsin. I think you could use some enteric type gut sort of acidifiers. And I also think you really need to get with Sean and run the 401H stool test to make sure, because see, anyone with IBS probably has a weakened gut immunity like we talked about, and needs to see if they've got parasites, bacteria, funguses, overgrowth. You're going to have a dysbiosis. You're going to have all this stuff going on. So I think you've done great work. I think you should keep doing what you're doing. I think you should work with Sean and some of these products. I don't have a, I'm not a real product guy. I don't have a favorite brand. I got nothing to sell you. But, Sean can turn you on to some really, really good products through Ultralife or BioHealth or,
I can't
We have
do
a
that.
product, Ultralife has a product called Mucosa Max. And I really think that's a wonderful product. BioHealth has a product called Support Mucosa. And, it's a combination of herbs and L-glutamine and, some things like that tend to soothe and heal and restore function. Obviously, none of that's going to help if you haven't eliminated the foods, the irritating foods, and any pathology, any bugs,
Okay. Can I ask another question real quick?
Yeah.
If possible? It might be two, actually. The other one was, I noticed when I started to get reactions, and this is when that pulled me to the doctor, because symptoms is a big word, and so kind of have to drill that down and figure out what symptoms. But I noticed that after I'd eat certain foods or after I would have certain foods, my lymph nodes in my armpits would hurt. And I remember you saying something about just recently, 10 minutes ago, about how, like, if the food goes into your bloodstream, it goes past through your lymph nodes too. So that's the one question, or just kind of a clarification on that. And the other one is, I took the metabolic typing online assessment, and a lot of I'm a fast oxidizers and protein type, and a lot of my foods that came back as strikes don't have, I was sensitive to, and I was wondering if there's a correlation to that or not.
The correlation between food and the lymph nodes? I wouldn't say there's a direct correlation, but because with swollen lymph nodes, you're really looking at infections like more like from open wounds, infected things like that, and more that kind of infection. But
it wasn't really swollen; it was just more tender. But it went away.
Yeah, it's obviously stimulating something, and you mentioned the foods, that you need to stay off of, even if they are on your metabolic typing good list. By the way, I commend you for getting the metabolic typing test done. That's where food selection has to start, and then you eliminate. This says here, this is what you should be able to eat as a fast oxidizer, but then your ELISA test said, well, except for these ones, don't eat these ones, and that's what you need to stick with. By the way, I need to back up a sec too on the IBS thing and say that that's a serious condition that you should see a physician for too, and get their opinion. Make sure it isn't something more serious. There can be really nasty things that aren't in the scope of a nutritionist's practice. So we can help you, restore the immune system, return digestion to normal, and all this sort of stuff. But sometimes there's stuff that comes along, and you need to be in charge, James. You need to be in charge and see both guys, Sean and your physician, and work them together.
Yeah,
Sean
I think in the past,
totally good with that.
I think I went to normal physicians in the past, and it just didn't get me anywhere. I had scans and everything to make sure there was nothing structurally wrong, and it just it ended up going to take a pill to suppress whatever symptom you're having. I just
you're going to end up on steroidal anti-inflammatory. I know the whole thing. I've had people who were about to have their guts taken out. I literally just a few days away from surgery to remove sections of their small intestine, and where they didn't want to do it, and it's like, what else? And it's under their own decision and advisement that they just chose another path. Well, hey, let's run the, your doctor never looked here, he never looked there, he didn't do this, he didn't do that, and then we find out when we run these tests and do these things, real strict regimen, then you can actually recover much of the time.
Cool deal.
Awesome.
James, thanks for calling in.
You guys.
Give me an email, Sean.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure, buddy.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
Yep. All right, good call, very good call. We got another caller from the 803. Hang on for a second, 803. We got a Twitter question from Diane. Diane from balancebites.com. Balancebites.com. Had to put that one out there. Diane's cool people. Reed, is charting food and poop an effective way to detect sensitivities and allergies, or would a test be far more accurate?
I didn't hear the first couple words.
Is charting your food
charting.
and your poop? Yeah, charting your food and poop an effective way to detect sensitivities and allergies, or would a test be more accurate?
Well, charting foods is very helpful. I think it's a good discipline, and I think you can get some decent results that way. And, when that fails, test.
Yeah.
Do both. I mean, it seems, you're kind of answering the question by walking through it there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And people need to also understand that there's a difference between an allergy and a sensitivity. And so you can eat something on Monday with a sensitivity and not really have a reaction to it until like Wednesday. And so they're really hard to figure out, whereas an allergy would be like if you eat some peanuts and you break out in hives immediately. Most people tend to know what their allergies are, but sensitivities are different because they're delayed. Let's go back to the phone lines. 803, if I can bring this caller on. Caller from the 803, welcome to my little show here, talking to Reed Davis. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Toby from South Carolina. How's it going, Sean?
Toby, what's up, man? How you doing?
Nothing much. How you been?
I'm just hanging, man. Just doing my thing. Thanks for all the tweets, man. I appreciate that.
You got it.
How's it going, Toby?
Good. Hey, everything you guys are saying, great. How about some practical information, too, for people? I mean, I know Sean kind of slapped it on me a few times, just like, chew your food properly, don't drink a lot of fluid while you're eating, your stomach's an acid pit, things like the proper, I guess, oxalates and phytates, soaking your foods, trypsin inhibitors, cooking your eggs properly. There are other things you can do that are practical that can help, just like pre-digestion kind of things.
That's a really good question. Why don't you take that one, Sean, because, you're the lifestyle coach, man.
Well, of course, Toby kind of told you a few things that I tell my clients, The teeth are part of the digestive system. You need to break down your food. You don't want big old chunks of food in your stomach because it makes it much harder to break down. You don't want to drink a whole bunch of water with your meals. You're going to dilute some of that hydrochloric acid in there and impede some of your digestion. So we want to chew our food until it's liquid before we swallow. So slow down, guys. And of course, as Toby was saying, soaking your grains, soaking your nuts is a good idea due to the phytic acids or the phytates that are within the grains. Plants like to protect themselves. And so they produce this phytic acid, which binds on to the very important minerals like calcium, magnesium, zinc, copper, and whatnot. And you want to free those up, and so soaking your grains overnight will help to get rid of that phytic acid and free up those minerals for you. And so you may look on the side of your bread or something like that and see all the minerals that are there, but if it's not sprouted, you're probably not going to be taking it in. And as Toby mentions, I should let Toby do this one, but trypsin inhibitors. That we're going to get from soy. I mean, we really shouldn't be having non-fermented soy in the first place, but those trypsin inhibitors are going to impede the breakdown of your amino acids and your proteins. And so that's a really good question, Toby. That was good stuff. You have anything to add, Toby?
Well,
not really. I was just curious, is there anything else, that maybe food itself protects itself from the human body, I guess, from breaking it down besides those couple things? Was there, there are other maybe, I hadn't read Sally Fallon's book yet. I mean, I have it, but I haven't read it. I don't know, fermenting the soy, that kind of stuff. I don't know. There's other maybe preparations you can do to different foods. Anyway, that was just my main stuff.
No, Toby, it's a really good. Sean should have, a guest on that's really into the coaching up of the whole cooking and eating thing. You know who might be good is Nancy Dale, Sean. Get Nancy Dale on, because she is a personal chef, metabolic typing, FDN, person who really has a lot of valuable information on that, preparing of foods and selection. I just tell people get on it. Make sure you're eating a metabolic typing diet because you're more likely to be able to break down and absorb that stuff. And yeah, we have some certain foods we know are no good for anybody. There's no quote-unquote good and bad foods. I think there are some bad foods. It doesn't matter who you are. Trans fatty acids and sugar, and all those sort of common, well, I call it common sense stuff, but
eat a whole food diet. I notice on my 20% days where I'm, going off my diet, my poop's a little bit weird, y'all. You know what I'm saying? It ain't the same as it always is. And so if your poop is weird right now, then maybe the first thing that you should do is just start looking at your diet and saying, hey, if there's weird stuff coming in my body through my food consumption, you're probably going to get weird stuff coming out of your body. And so, that's kind of step one right there. Maybe if that doesn't work, you should start seeking other things. Now, if you've got diarrhea every time you go to the bathroom, like some of my clients have, then you probably got something else going on. If you're bloating every time, you're getting heartburn every single time, then that's something a little more serious that you may need some help with. Right on. Toby, thanks for calling in, man.
Yep. You guys keep rolling. Take it easy.
Thanks a lot, man.
Yep, too. Toby just sucks up information, man. He's a big time reader, watching the DVDs. That's the dude right there. Let me get some of these Facebook questions in before I let you go. I think this one's from Carol. How can you tell if you have truly rid yourself of candida or parasites, or do they lie dormant indefinitely waiting for you to have a bite of a cookie?
Is that a question for me? What is it?
That's a question for you. Yeah, how do you truly know when you've gotten rid of candida or parasites?
Well, we do retest an awful lot when we want to be sure, but there's two different ways to consider that. What I do is like to look at the gut function. Remember, we mentioned that, having a parasite or a fungal infection or bacteria is one thing, and it certainly needs to be dealt with. And yet, if you leave it there, if you go, well, here's some stuff that's absolutely known to be effective against, H. pylori or Blastocystis hominis or what have you, and that person takes it for a month, and then they could even retest for that one thing, 4 weeks later. We usually wait at least a month, and then that one might be when we retest. But what have you really done for that person? Well, you got rid of a bug that shouldn't have been there in the first place. And you said it. Why was it there in the first place is the real question. So you look at exposure, and you also look at the health of the gut. Why didn't your body defend you against this thing? Now, that's because the things I mentioned are very opportunistic, and they're only, again, we're not talking about, an HIV test, positive, negative. Oh, that's got to be treated for the rest of your life, whatever. We're talking about opportunistic organisms like yeast and blastocystis and these others that shouldn't be there. And so the retesting, and how do you know you got rid of it for sure? What we do is go back to that mucosal barrier function test, and we rerun that test, and we see if the gut is returned to normal function. Based on the test numbers, we say, oh, your immunity looks good, your digestion, your breakdown and absorption of nutrients look good. You're functioning the way you're supposed to be functioning now. So that way, now this is, I need to contrast this with chasing symptoms, because a lot of people might have a symptom, take a product for a while, and they don't have that symptom anymore. And they go, okay, I must have got rid of it. And that's one way of doing it. So the answer is basically we retest, but I need to qualify which test do we use. We try to use the functional test, not just the identifier test. Although they're both really, we try to use them both.
And that's where a lot of people miss the boat right there. I've had many clients who came up with H. pylori or something, through their doctor, and the doctor never asked for a retest. And then a couple of years down the line, they're like, those symptoms are coming back. They probably just never got rid of it because they should have been retested in the first place. Let's hit another question here. We'll go two more. How much time is needed for a meal to be fully digested or passed through in a healthy digestive system? So talking about like hypermotility or hypomotility. What do you think, Reed?
Yeah, it's a good question, and you said the right thing. It depends. What that's called is transit time. And if you wanted to test it, they make these little charcoal capsules that you can take with a meal, and then you can check your poop out and see when it's completely black. You can, obviously, that charcoal. So you can test transit time. Now, a real short transit time, probably not a great idea any more than a real long transit time. Like if it's 2-3 days, this would be considered way too slow. That hypomotility versus hypermotility. The book, I think, says something like, 12 to 15 hours is reasonable, but it's certainly going to vary from person to person and from type to type, and I think everyone needs to find their own perfect transit time. So, again, there's what the book says. I think it's 12 hours. And then there's you, the list.
What if it's really fast? Like, what if they do the charcoal test or the beet test?
I would be just as concerned with hypermotility. If it's everything, if you eat breakfast and you're smelling it at lunch, never mind, that's not a right way to say that. That's too short, and hypermotility is a problem. That's where I would want to run a few tests, and see what's going on. You'd want to slow that down.
Well, could be food.
That'd be no better than someone who's only pooping every other day.
Right, because you're not going to be able.
That's absolutely too long.
Yeah, because if it's going through too fast, then they probably aren't absorbing their nutrients from that food.
Yeah, you're looking at someone who might be eating a whole lot and absorbing very little.
That's exactly. Yeah. Let's do one more, and I'll let you roll. Let's see here. Here we go. Here's a question that's pretty decent. What can be done about parasites that are in other organs, say the liver, and how do they get there? Do they come through the intestinal wall? Do you know about that?
It depends how they get in, but yeah, there's some things like Entamoeba histolytica is one that will migrate out of, it comes through, let's say you've ingested and it's somehow migrated out into circulation, and they can get into organs, including the heart, the brain, the liver, and form cysts, and then, eventually those could break open, and the toxicity that comes out can kill you. I mean, you have known cases of, I believe Entamoeba histolytica is a good example, I'm pretty sure, of like a cyst in a liver, and then they're doing like liver surgery for some other reason, and they break open that cyst, and this person dies within 2 hours of the poison. They're just poisoned by all this stuff coming out at one time. So, as to how they get in, I think gut hyperpermeability is a big thing to watch out for.
Absolutely. Reed Davis, man.
Yeah,
Good
man.
Stuff. Once again, I love it.
Sean, I appreciate you inviting me to your great show. I'm really proud of everything you're doing. You're at the top of the heap, man, and we all have a lot of work to keep doing. I'm never right about everything. I have a few things nailed, and I'm here to be helpful. But the work you're doing with your functional diagnostic nutrition, you've really adopted, I think, a wonderful model of, I'll call it a model of healthcare, but really what you do is teach a self-care model. You're educating people how to look after themselves and not to rely on just, modern medicine, drugs and surgery, and all that nasty stuff.
It's all about educating the client to take care of themselves, and so they can heal themselves. It's not about me laying my hands on somebody and saying, if you're healed, it's about them doing it themselves, and they've got to want to do it as well.
Let me throw in one other thing. If anyone's interested in what you've learned, the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition course, they could just go to fdnmanager.com. That's FDN, like Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Manager.com, and they can get it. There's a complete course description there. And if you're a healthcare provider listening, and you should have a little background like Chek or metabolic typing, some kind of background like, we'd like to have you come on board and start learning what we're doing.
That's fdnmanager.com, right?
Yes, sir.
Right on, my man.
Okay, man.
Thanks again, Reed. Go enjoy this
Thanks,
beautiful
John.
day in San Diego. All right, man. You have a good one.
weekend.
I'm out of here, guys. Undergroundwellness.com, youtube.com/undergroundwellness. You guys know what's up. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.